With the anti-police rhetoric often playing out across social media, many officers report they're not being respected by youth and others that they come across. More recently, others are actually reporting they're receiving a lot of warm welcomes and more appreciation than usual. Today, we're going to speak with a law enforcement expert, Bobby Limbaugh Jr. He is the author of Surviving the Stop, Change the Atmosphere, Change the Outcome. Bobby, you've worked in law enforcement for over 30 years on a local and federal level. Now you focus, your area of expertise is at-risk youth. In your experience, is police and community relations as bad as many believe it to be, or is it being blown out of proportion?
I think it could be a lot better. I don't think it's as bad as we're blowing out, but I think it's at a point to where we need to start looking at how we're structuring it, and it needs to improve, definitely.
What are your thoughts on body cameras? Do you think that they're going to make a huge difference?
I think that the body cameras are necessary because it gives the citizens a sense of transparency. You know, in order to transform a community or transform people, they need to have some sense of transparency to let them know that what's happening is really what's happening, as opposed to thus says law enforcement.
Now, you're saying you've worked with you've worked with at-risk youth. What are you hearing from them in terms of when they're being pulled over or their relationship with police?
I think that when we talk about youth and at-risk youth, the thing is respect. There's this big thing about respect on both sides, and I get it. I think that a lot of respect has left our culture. We need to respect one another. So when you talk about young men being respected, they feel as if they're not handled or treated a certain way. And of course, you know, the police, myself, law enforcement officials feel that we're not handled or respected in such a way. It's almost like an unsung hero. I heard you mention about the support that the police departments across the country are getting in some places. It's after the fact, after we lose officers. We should get that support all the time.
That's a great point. I want to talk to you now about the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you think that they're helping police relations with the community, or do you think they're making matters worse?
You know, I respect Black Lives Matter. I get it. I understand. Being a black man, having black kids, having a black father, but I have a biracial mother. I have a daughter-in-law who's from India. My grandchildren are African American Indian. So when I think about Black Lives Matter, I understand what they're saying, that black lives gotta matter to the police and to society. But at the same time, I get it. Black lives gotta matter to us as well. You know, it doesn't do me any good to taunt that my life matters to you, but then on the other hand, I approach a whole different situation. I get what they're saying and I understand it, but as a black man coming from a biracial mother and having biracial and white friends, it's hard for me to say that your life doesn't matter. I get what they're saying, but I think we need to figure out, what are you wanting? How do we do this, and how are we going to do this? We can't keep segregating ourselves and saying, well, I matter and you don't. We back to the old divide. As long as we keep dividing, we'll keep having these same problems rearing their head every so often.
Speaking of drawing a wedge in between different races, we've heard a lot from Donald Trump about banning Muslims from the United States, for instance, but he also calls himself the candidate for law enforcement. Between him and Clinton, who do you think would be a better candidate for law enforcement?
Well, my opinion is, I don't know Mr. Trump. I don't know Mrs. Clinton personally. What I can tell you is how I'm going to vote when I go into the booth to vote. Mrs. Clinton probably will get my vote without question.
And why do you say that?
Well, I don't like the dividing. I don't like the disrespect that I've seen. I don't like singling out some of the questions that are asked to Mr. Trump. I don't think he gives a definitive answer on them. His temperament, I don't really care too much for his temperament. That's just my personal opinion. You know, everyone has a right to vote how they feel. That's just thus says Bobby when it comes to voting on those two candidates.
A lot of people have a lot of criticisms for Trump, you know, as you mentioned, that big divide that some people accuse him of having. But people also accuse Clinton of being untrustworthy. What about Gary Johnson? Does he fit into this equation at all?
I mean, I think everything is relevant. You have to take the whole, everything is like a gumbo. Take everything, mix it up, and what's going to work for the country. You know, we're so busy talking about me. Law enforcement, Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, all lives matter. It's going to take a collective effort from everybody. One of the hardest things to do is to look at yourself and do a self-analyzation. What do I bring to the table? How can I make it better? How can I fix the problem? It's going to be we the people for the people. We've got to come together as a unit instead of individuals. We'll do nothing as individuals.
Bobby, you're raising 7 boys. What instructions and advice do you have for them when they're stopped by police?
I have 5 of my boys are driving now. I've been a single parent for 11 years after passing of my wife. And one of the things that I tell my boys that are driving, regardless of what you think when law enforcement stops you, if you think they're wrong, okay, we'll deal with that Monday through Friday in a courtroom. You do what they say, show them the utmost respect. As a matter of fact, my son brought home a ticket just the other day where he got stopped. When I leave the interview, I was going downtown to see, okay, what do we need to do? What fine do we need to pay? I'm not exempt from that. My kids are not exempt from being stopped by the police. So I always tell them, which they do, is if there's a problem, we'll deal with it, not on the side of the road.
That's great advice. When society is surrounded by shootings and so much racial tension, it's nice to see someone like you working to bring law enforcement and youth together. Bobby Kimbrough, Jr., great to have you on with us this evening.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.